all things being equal, all BenTech companies know that a better user experience for plan members, employers, and brokers is important. However, it's not always easy to justify. So how can a BenTech company measure the impact of an investment in redesigning their product or their platform to justify that expense to executive stakeholders?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that it's where you start always when you're working through even the ideation of a redesign. And that's really the first question that the person who's responsible for that redesign is going to get asked. There's multiple ways. I mean, obviously sales kind of trumps everything. So, looking at your sales, looking at potential losses and doing a postmortem to determine why and finding out it's because of your UX or UI. The customer service reduction that can result from a really great enrollment experience is another thing that can be measured, and it's very meaningful to those platforms that are supporting them. Broker adoption is huge. When you're working with a broker, you have the opportunity to be one-to-many. And so if you've got a broker who believes in your technology, believes in your process, and knows that there's a return on that investment, they're going to be one of your best advocates. And they'll recommend your platform with great amounts of trust. And that's really, really important because that's obviously going to feed your sales pipeline. The other piece of it is that these platforms are connecting with carriers and being easy to work with and having the right tech stack, let's say, to be able to create the integrations necessary in the least painful way is really important, because for carriers, they have hundreds of BenAdmin platforms that they have to or desire to connect with, but they usually choose a few that are kind of preferred partners. And those preferred partners are the ones that have their act together when it comes to the integration from the carrier standpoint. The enrollment conversion is another really big piece because that's where the carriers are looking to see where's our return on our investment. Because we're obviously paying to integrate with these platforms, or paying technology fees. What are we getting back for it? Are we getting the response that we were hoping for? And are we confident and comfortable that the employee, the end user, who's really the judge of all of this, right, that they're understanding the full value of a customized benefits package? And that's it. It's kind of a start from there and work your way back, because the employee, if they have a great experience, they probably won't say a whole lot. If they have a bad experience, they're going to say a lot. And they're going to go to their HR, and HR is going to go to the broker, and the broker is going to go to the carrier or the platform. And it kind of flows uphill. And to minimize that noise with a really great redesign and user experience, that is absolutely measurable.
Oh, that's fantastic. Wow. It's clear how deep your experience is in this area. I'm curious, do you see any differences between more of the mandatory products, the health and dental, for example, versus the auxiliary products that are often included at the end of an enrollment experience in terms of the way you might justify the redesign investment?
That's an interesting question, because it has a lot to do with the order of the benefits as they're offered. And, you can have a little bit of choice fatigue by the time you get to the 8th, 9th, 10th benefit, either electing or waiving. And so simplifying that process first and foremost, making it so that they aren't re-entering the same information over and over. Those things are very, very helpful for them to get through it more quickly. With those core type products, you're generally having an employer contribution. So it's really more of a decision, which one do I want, unless I already know I don't want it. I'm on my spouse's plan. I don't need that coverage. So where it really starts to be important, well, I shouldn't say that those aren't important, because obviously they are important, but where the experience really starts to show its worth is in those voluntary products. Because have you surfaced the right information up front, easily accessible, with the right decision support tools to be able to help people to easily make a decision? Because if I have to go through 15 questions to be lumped into a single persona and there's only 6 total, I don't feel like you know me. I don't feel like you know what my needs are. And I don't feel like, I'll get frustrated with that. And that's where you'll have a lot of leakage if you have a bad experience. So I would say it's more important on the voluntary side when it's employee dollars and you only have a minimum share of wallet. BenAdmin, from a platform standpoint, it's been around for a long time. It's been around for 25 plus years. And there's a good share of that technology that is still operating, that was built 20 to 25 years ago. And the overall experience from a platform company, from their standpoint, when they have that older technology, is it's hard to demo. You're sitting in front of a group of brokers who see all of your competitors. They know exactly what the other competitors can offer. And if yours is clunky, if it looks like an access program, if you're repeating a lot of the information, it's not impressive. It doesn't have that wow factor that's going to make that broker perk up and say, wow, this is really interesting. I like this. And a lot of times in a finals presentation for larger groups, you're also showing it in front of the employer. And you might have your C-suite there, but you're also going to have your HR leader there, and your HR leader knows how many calls they're getting from their employees when they're having a bad experience. And so they're looking for the ease of that overall experience. And if you don't have a system that's intuitive, if you don't have a system that can replicate information, like put in your personal information and then it's going to follow you through the process, those things are going to be readily apparent to those individuals. Another piece of it is from that HR administrator standpoint is how much information are we providing? Are we providing our employees with the information that they need to truly understand their benefit opportunities and to really value those benefits? Because employers spend so much time. It's really second from a budgetary standpoint behind only salaries. So their benefits budget is huge, and they want to make sure that they're getting the most out of it and that their employees see the value in it. And that value can be really tainted by a bad user experience, because they still have the same program and it's still a great program, but if it's not presented in an appealing, easy to use, intuitive way, you're going to end up with employees that go, meh, it's not so great. And it could be really great. So you're losing out on a ton of opportunity for employee satisfaction and retention.
Yeah.
So you're saying, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Nick.
I was going to say, not to mention any sort of friction on the employee side is going to cause a lot of overhead for operations and HR teams, like how many calls, how many times you have to walk them through and help them out. Yeah. Absolutely.
Another piece of it is, in insurance, we use a lot of acronyms, we use a lot of terminology. It's heavily regulated, and there's a reason for those things, and we have to do what we have to do. But being able to bring it to the employee at the right presentation level makes all the difference in the world. Because if I start rambling on to you about guaranteed issue and I speak to you like an underwriting manual is written, your eyes are going to go cross, you're going to glaze over, you're not going to pay any attention to me, you're going to hit decline and move on. But if I'm really simple about it and I say guaranteed issue is an opportunity for you to get life insurance without having to answer any health questions, this is a rare occurrence. You should really think about this. Presenting it in a way that makes sense to someone that isn't an expert in the industry. And I can tell you, as someone who's been in the industry for a very long time, I can get confused by some of the stuff that's out there. So, we really have to be cognizant and intentional in the terminology that gets used in the platforms as well.
I think, Carol, you've said to me before, and I might butcher this, but I think you said that most people would prefer to clean their kids' bedrooms versus sign up for benefits. Is that correct?
Yeah. No, so there was a study that was done, and I forget who had done the study, but they surveyed a number of individuals, and they asked people, would you rather enroll in your annual benefits or clean your teenager's room? And the majority actually chose cleaning a teenager's room. And trust me, I have 5 children and I only have 2 teenagers left, but I've been through a lot of teenagers' rooms, and that is not a positive statement about the way that the experience is rolling out for that end user.
No, that definitely puts it in perspective.
Frightening. Yeah.
I don't know, Nick, if you have anything to chime in with on this one.
I did, as we started getting into the conversation, when we talked about brokers and employer groups having expectations of what the software should be. I also wanted to call out that not only are they acquiring those expectations from other Ben admin platforms and competitors, but you're also collecting those experiences from just other software that works really well. So you had a great experience on Instagram or Facebook or something like this. I know it sounds a little ridiculous, but you're probably going back to this, like, why can't it work like this thing? Google does, this, why can't it work like that? And so that is something else really important to consider, is these sort of influencing platforms and pieces of software that deliver these great experiences that are setting expectations across the board.
Absolutely. And I don't think that's ridiculous at all. Because everyone is comparing this experience to other experiences. And, I know that in one of the workshops that we participated in years ago, one of the questions was, what's a really complicated topic that a specific website does really, really well? And the response that came back resoundingly was TurboTax. Right? So they ask you like maybe 2 questions on a page and you move on. And there's a ton of questions, and it's very technical and high level stuff, but you can easily access explanations and things like that. There's a lot of people that use that, and they're looking to their benefits to match from an experience standpoint what they experience when they shop, when they do their taxes, when they're on Facebook, whatever it is. If it can't be done on a phone, and if it can't be done relatively easily, you're going to lose a huge part of your audience.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. In my experience, and so my background is in enterprise custom software development. So unlike Nick, who's looked at problems from a user's perspective, I tend to look at them more from a technology and process perspective. And I know that the way most technology is developed, and I think at least the first iteration of most Ben admin platforms is you're really the user, in this case, the employee, is just sort of a cog in the wheel of a long running process, and sort of thought of that way. So step 1 in the process, step 2, and then step 3, I need to collect all of this data from this person. And so it's almost like, as a programmer, we would think about, okay, we need to get a data payload from this source. We need to get data payload from this source, which could be a computer. And we need to get a data payload from this source, which could be an external database. And so it's just sort of like, that's the way we're sort of thinking about it. And of course, the problem is that people don't behave necessarily like computers. And so you have to take that into account. But often, when I've seen these forms, they're sort of a replacement for the paper forms that came before. And are just field, in all the standard terms that you would use to yeah, exactly. And all the terms you would use to describe them in your own systems. And it's just sort of the expectation that if, you know, you must follow this process, you must be part of my huge flow chart and provide me this data so that we can move through this business process. And it's
which is another reason why they're saying they'd rather clean their teenager's room.
Yeah, exactly. And it's yeah, it's just a totally different perspective or paradigm. And you know, I think that it's interesting when you think about the fact that a lot of things that you use from a technology standpoint are sort of required. So if you go to work in the morning, it's likely that you're required to use a certain set of technology. But this technology is often can be thought of as more of a technology by choice. You don't have to use it. There's always a bailout option. And so you want to encourage people to not bail out of it, to use the technology versus relying on a more expensive means for the employer or the broker to fill in the gap.
Yeah. Well, and I think also I would add to that the best platforms create not a once and done, but a regular cadence of access. So they're bringing people in mid-year into their platforms for different pieces of information, and making it something that they gain familiarity with. And, you know, the old saying of familiarity breeds contempt, it's really the opposite here, in that familiarity breeds content. And, you know, we're able then to create that level of comfort, and people feel supported when they have that and they feel like it's easy to access.
I'm curious, Carol, how many companies are trying to do that mid-year sort of access, or is this like a one-off, a few, or really, really common?
It's really common. And, you know, the reason for it is because of those, if I only go in one time a year, I'm going to have 3 times as many questions as I will if I've been in the site 4 times this year and I already know my login and I already am comfortable with where I'm going. And when I log in, it gives me information about what I'm wanting to access right now and what I need to do and when. And, you know, it keeps me it keeps me organized from a benefits standpoint, but it also is feeding me information and softening a little that what we've jokingly called a grudge purchase, right? You know, like that insurance is a grudge purchase. Nobody really wants to, but they have to. And it makes it so that it's at least less painful, but you know, hopefully eventually with good content. And, you know, financial wellness is becoming a huge part of it. You know, being able to engage people throughout the year, it absolutely has year-end results when you're going through your annual enrollment or open enrollment period. So it's a very common thing that employers are asking platforms, what content do you have that we can roll out in campaigns mid-year to keep people in those platforms?
A lot to unpack there when we get into a strategy phase. So you're compelled by going digital. You want to know how to do it, what to do. As part of a UX, in other words, user experience strategy, any part of this or the foundation of this is users. And to that end, you have to meet with your users, and you can do this in the beginning, you can do this in the middle, you can do this in the end. The more that you can meet with them and find information from them and insights and unmet needs and all these other things, and as frequently as you can, the more informed and differentiated your product will be. This is especially important as many other companies are wanting to go digital and wanting to modernize and have these great user experiences. How is your product going to be differentiated or competitive if everyone sort of has table stakes and very common things across the board? So this is the way to meet with your exact end users, brokers, employees, employer groups to understand what would be a great product. So that would be the first thing in any user experience strategy. And then basically you want to take as much information as you can glean from those people and turn those into overarching principles, guidelines, sort of North Stars to inform your design team. So they can take those, and there's going to be thousands of micro decisions made from developers, from project managers, product owners, designers all the time. And the more they have those visionary statements or artifacts to look at and make decisions from, the more you can drive success with that experience. So that's where design principles will come into play. These are things like the differentiating statements that make your product unique that you're going to adhere to. I don't want to get on a tangent. Kevin, you know how I get about design principles, so we'll pause on that one. But those are design principles, and then you can also craft experience visions or journey maps, visual artifacts that basically give you a high level view of where you're going and how you can make decisions. So are we making decisions based on this sort of pain point in this one area of the experience? Or are we making decisions based on the end, that type of thing? So you'll give all that to the design team, they'll execute. You want to follow up frequently. You want the design team doing critique, which is basically how well or not is my design decision, my design solution meeting the objectives of the project, meeting the vision. And so the design team will run through those activities. Once there's a design to test, ideally you get that in front of users to test how well or not it's meeting those needs in terms of usability. And then lastly, you want to get the designs in front of developers with style guides and basically guidelines on how to implement. And ideally also you get your designers with the development team so you can support them, and maybe there's something you didn't design and you put off just to get to some meatier features. You can help them understand what was intended with some button. Where does this button go? How does, when I click the back button, where does that go? And all these other things. So the more you're collaborating on this vision and these principles as a team, the more those decisions get a lot easier, and the more you can actually realize success with what you initially intended. So I'll pause there.
I've got a follow-up for you on that, Nick, or at least around the research. So one of the things I hear a lot when speaking with folks about research is they'll say, I'll often quote one of two famous innovators, Henry Ford, who said that if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. He didn't actually say that, by the way, but I still hear it all the time. The second one, I think, actually was a real quote, which Steve Jobs said something to the effect that if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster BlackBerry, or one with a bigger screen or a better keyboard or whatever it might be, but not an iPhone. The point, though, is what they're trying to convey is that people who use technology don't know how to inform the development of a next generation or a better product. And so I'm curious how you react to that that sort of critique or concern around speaking with end users.
Yeah, you want to study behavior. You don't want to study words. So it's like do as I say, not as I do. There's another funny sort of analogy, and that's if you watch someone go through the grocery store and they say I eat healthy, but then you watch them buy chips or soda or whatever. So you want to study actual behavior. A bad question to ask a user would be, what do you think? Or do you like this? Actually, is probably the worst one. Do you like this? This is a leading question. This is biased. You want them to like it. Ideally, they do. But really, when you want to study behavior, so you can ask things like, what are you seeing on this page? What are you seeing? Like, I see all kinds of things, but what's your experience like? You can ask them to accomplish tasks for you. Can you go ahead and sign up, enroll for this benefit? And watch them and observe. So the more you're quiet and the more they're talking, the better off you'll be. So it's a really important point. Another question I've heard often asked is, what would you like? Like, can you just tell me what the requirements are so I can go do them? And it's really hard for people to do it. And so innovation doesn't come that way. It comes from trying to gain insights across patterns of people and your competitors as well. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Kara, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in if you had any thoughts.
I do. Actually, it's a little bit of a joke, but not a joke. People bond over mutual hatred way more than they do over mutual appeal. And so when you're talking to people and asking them, if you say, what do you want? So it's not necessarily a design informed or an insurance informed response that you're going to get. It's going to be more about the other buying experiences that they have through some of the other sites that we've talked about, like an Amazon like experience, things like that. So I agree wholeheartedly with Nick that you have to be really careful in the questions that you ask. And, the survey work is really, really important because you can glean from that more around where's the pain, and also following kind of that customer journey and having a key metric around where's leakage, where are we losing people in this process, and why? Are we losing them because it's boring? Are we losing them because it's too complicated? Like, why are we losing the attention of those individuals? And it's kind of that combination, right? So you're asking them questions about their experience, both good and bad, but you're also combining that with the actual behavior. So like you had mentioned, Kevin, that their behavior doesn't always follow either computer logic or logic in general. And sometimes, we think everyone wants a million choices, but we also know there's analysis paralysis when that happens and people get overwhelmed. And so finding that balance, I think, is really important.
One of the challenges with innovation in general of any form is gaining stakeholder alignment. There's often more risk perceived for an innovation initiative than there is potential reward, especially if you're looking at it from different people's perspectives. So for example, somebody in IT may perceive a lot more risk to an innovation initiative than they do see reward for themselves in their careers. And yet they are, and many others are important to come together. It's critical that they come together to align behind an initiative like this, lest you are left behind a company that just starts from the end, who a startup or somebody who doesn't have to essentially deal with all of this baggage, this 20 or 25 years of baggage that you are potentially as an organization. And so the question to you, Carol, is what are some of the best ways that you've found to gain stakeholder alignment and ensure ultimately that the goals of the redesign are actually met?
Yeah, so it's the number one, right? It's the green light to be able to move forward. And I somewhat, excuse me, would liken it gaining stakeholder agreement as herding cats. And the reason being is you have competing agendas. Everyone that you're talking to has specific things that are important to them. So like you said, IT is looking at it from a level of effort standpoint. Your CFO is looking at it from a cost savings perspective. Your HR person is looking at it from an efficiency and a customer service perspective. Your CEO is looking at the expense of the redesign and what kind of return on investment are we going to get from this. So that top-down support is absolutely crucial, and you have to have that before you can go forward. And if you have it begrudgingly, you're going to have a harder road, and it's tough to keep them coming along with you for the ride and continue to support it, because that design curve, it gets a little harder once you get started. And as you're going up, you're going to get to a point where you're going to get a few stakeholders that are going to start feeling some doubts and some static around what you're doing. And it's possible that if you're not over communicating and you're not keeping them informed of the overall process and the progress of the project design, you could lose some of that support. So I would say number one, it's absolutely top-down support is required. The second is some ROI projections. Tough to do sometimes, but I would say that at least creating metrics that you plan to track. And then as you're going through your project plan and working through your requirements, you're keeping those key metrics in mind so that you can, in the future, be able to measure them to show that return on investment. Having a really good business case that resonates with those individuals in different ways. So recognizing that you have those competing agendas, a business case that really hits everyone's main thing that they're looking for from an objective standpoint is really important. And the thing that I have found to be the most successful is making sure that that includes the opportunity cost of not doing the redesign. And that's looking back into your sales pipeline and saying, we've lost X number of RFPs because they said our design was clunky. They said it wasn't appealing. It doesn't look like TurboTax. It doesn't look like Amazon. You know, whatever that is, you know, you have to make sure that you're spurring that movement and innovation forward by showing the cost that will continue and possibly increase if you don't do it. Bringing in those third-party perspectives, we talked about the surveys. That is a really, really powerful tool when you're working with your stakeholders to show them those surveys and to be really specific about who you're bringing in for those surveys. So you want to have like a client advisory board. You want to have a broker advisory board. You want to have kind of the hands that feed you part of the process. And that's really, there's benefits twofold. One, you're able to take that to your stakeholders and say, this is what they're saying. They're saying that this is bad and it's something we need to change. But on the other side, you're involving some of your key people that you want to do business with and you want more business from in the overall conversation. And then they feel invested. They feel like they were part of the overall improvement, and they're going to be an even bigger advocate for your platform and for the overall results when they're working with their clients. So I would say, you know, you can throw a lot of statistics, you can bring in user data, you can talk about the 10 heuristics that are the best practices for UI UX and where your site generally falls down. And I would say that probably most of those that are, well, probably more than 10 years old, they're going to fail probably 5 of those 10. And being able to pinpoint those items really gives you clarity on the roadmap that you have moving forward for the redesign that you're considering. So I would say being very intentional about understanding your stakeholders' agendas and what they're looking for from a result, and including that upfront in a business case and projections and key metrics that you're going to measure, and then following through on that, executing on that.
Right. So there could be a possibility, for example. Oh, sorry, Nick. I'm just going to add one thought and then I'll come back to you. There could be an opportunity, for example, with IT, if some of this legacy technology is actually presenting security risks or maintenance, increased maintenance costs, or maybe an opportunity, for example, to add a key metric or an objective about improving those areas, which could then almost like how you get support in Congress where you agree to build a plant in somebody's local jurisdiction, you add that objective in there, and then that could bring them in terms of what they're hoping to accomplish as well.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Nick, I cut you off.
No, you're fine. There's 2 things that came to mind, Carol, as you were talking about sort of the strategies to align stakeholders and your business partners. One of them is you can either ask, if you can, ask any of the stakeholders to sort of ride along with a customer or end user or broker interview or research session, so they can get sort of firsthand experience of what people are seeing, what their experience is like, and why or why not they can't accomplish something or something like that. So oftentimes getting that front end experience is really helpful. So that's one thing you can do. The second piece is that if you have an innovation leader or some design partner, a lot of times they'll run sort of workshops with your team And that is a good way to bring in sort of quieter voices or just get people exposure, get people's ideas out there. And through that dialogue and through those activities, now it's on Zoom, it used to be on a whiteboard, but there's a lot of creative ways you can do it digitally now. You can facilitate that conversation that ideally leads to a little more alignment about where you could go and what is possible. And you're exposing stakeholders to some of the problems that you're seeing. And so those are things that you can do that might not sort of put the nail in the coffin for like ultimate alignment, but actually that's a bad analogy. Maybe silver bullet.
Well, so you're 100% correct though, in that the design thinking workshops, because I've participated in multiple of them with your team, they were total like aha moments for our teams. Being able to crystallize what your roadmap looks like based on your priorities and where your weaknesses are, that's a tough thing to do on your own. And it can feel really overwhelming when you're starting a redesign to go, where are we going to start? And everybody goes, let's start on the first page. Okay, so what ultimately are we intending to do here? What is our intention with this? And being really crystal clear on what that is, and then being able to create and articulate a roadmap that's going to accomplish those things with a logical progression. And those workshops were invaluable to our team. And those were also, so we talked about gaining the support from stakeholders and then maintaining it as you go. Those workshops were, again, invaluable for my ability to maintain that support ongoing, to be able to show, here's where we are, here's where we're going, and weekly, here's our progress. So they feel like they can actually see and feel and touch those things that are going to improve the overall experience. And I'll be honest with you, when you think about internal staff that you would have in either a ben admin platforms company, whether it's a carrier who's trying to handle their own tech or even white label tech, there generally isn't going to be a really well-versed UI UX designer. And that's by design, they really don't have the intention of having someone on staff long-term to do that, because it ends up being kind of a once we create it, it's done. And that's why we have 20 years of tech debt, right? So that's where a partnership like Praxent is so valuable, because you're able to kind of keep that pulse going forward and making sure with those spot checks, are we still, do we need to make some little incremental corrections? Do we need to update just one thing? And can we do it easily and efficiently without having to bring on additional staff and using Praxent as augmentation?
Yeah. You're sort of touching on something that's really, I think, really helpful. Let's say you just can't get this huge budget for this massive redesign, which is super common. And I think it's probably important to know that all is not lost. You mentioned starting somewhere, starting small. So look at some analytics, maybe just to get a hint. Maybe you can't do customer research. So where are people dropping off? You might not know why, but you just know that they're not converting in this one spot. Let's just focus there and just do a small effort and see what we can find and what we can dig up. Oh, it's a word, or an email is going out. We just need to change the subject line, or the button is missing. And so it might be doing some of these things already, but if you can get those small wins, especially if you're trying to build your case for a larger redesign, then you can go back and say, we just did this one little tweak and sort of made it a bit more human-centered, and all of a sudden that problem is gone. So what about this problem? What about this problem? And then perhaps you build that case for that sort of higher level strategy.
That's a great point. And being able to have data points that will provide you with the understanding that you can then share with your stakeholders for those really painful points, that's low-hanging fruit. I mean, that's stuff that you can get taken care of very quickly and with a small budget. And as you start to make those improvements, you gain momentum, and you're able to gain that traction with your stakeholders to say, gosh, maybe we really do need a whole new look and feel. And if we did that, what would that look like? And that's really you're in there. So you can definitely, having a partner that gives you that flexibility is absolutely integral to the process.
Yeah, and maybe instead of sort of biting the entire pie right out of the gate, and that's harder to convince people of, is can you get buy-in to just do a workshop, a couple of hours with another team just to see what happens? I would stress to make sure that your goals to whatever innovation partner or colleague or agency that you're working with are clear. So like, this is what I'm hoping to get out of this thing. I'd love to get buy-in. I need you to come up with things that are sort of outcome oriented, goal based. And, I love to align my stakeholders. I love to envision what the future looks like with a redesign. Is there, some way we can do that? And you can design your meeting, you can design your activities together, and have those outcomes front of mind as you go into those, so that you're facilitating better as well. So I'm trying to get ways to, you don't have to do the whole thing right out of the gate. It's just so hard to just get that momentum going. So if you just find these little small things to do to sort of build that momentum, then that can often result in a big win.
100% agree. I think the best place to start for us was the UI UX assessment, and having just like your most common workflow, having that demoed for the Praxent team, and then the Praxent team comes back with all of their recommendations. And then you through that workshop, work through, how do we prioritize these things? And that gives you, again, that clarity around, where do we start? Are we going to eat the whole elephant? Regardless of how we're going to do it one bite at a time. So where are we starting? And it usually, like I said, as you start to build that momentum, the traction you'll be gaining that traction and moving it forward.
That's fantastic. I'll add just a couple of thoughts for specifically bringing technology leaders, and along within an organization. I've had a lot of experience doing that, and it's its own unique challenge, I think. Often there's a joke that it's not the CIO, it's the CI no. So often the IT organization is, or the team that has built and currently maintains the current product is seen as an obstacle within the organization. I think even to this day, I'm not sure there's ever been a CIO that's actually been promoted to a CEO in a Fortune 500 company, which is a telling statement. So there's that reputation, and and there's some reason for that, but it's also, in my experience, the fact that folks in business often aren't taking seriously the concerns of those people in technology, and so they've developed a reflexive reaction to just say no, anytime something comes along. And when I found anything new and exciting, anything that would make other people happy within the organization, and what I found is that a good strategy there is probably like anything, is to listen first, seek to understand before being understood, and really validate the concerns that person might be raising. Doing this could threaten or could put at risk our data security, and we need to comply with HIPAA, and this is a very serious issue, and I don't see that that's really being taken seriously in your plan. Or we're responsible for maintaining the uptime of this system, and I don't see that you're really talking to me about that, or that we've really identified a plan to address that, or there may be other issues that they're raising, or costs. I don't know how you expect me to maintain this new system before we're able to retire the existing one, and I just don't have the budget for it, and I'm ultimately feel like I'm going to be the one that is blamed for the failure here if I'm not able to figure out how to maintain both systems, before before the new one becomes the only system that we're using. So I think just, really listening and validating those concerns and making sure there's some element to address that. I can't tell you how many times I've shared or validated a concern that I just see the entire posture of somebody in technology change, the body language. Oh, okay. I didn't expect you to say that. Okay, I can start breathing again. I'm not in fight or flight mode. I can.
Now I'm listening to you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, just another thought to consider.
I would add to that, Kevin. It's really important to have a product owner or an innovation leader that is adept not only in the business but can translate to the technology side. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to be that person, and in my current role I'm that person. And I live in both worlds. I live in the technology world as well as in the business world, and bringing the concerns from whoever it is that you're working with as a key stakeholder on the business side to the technology side, helping them understand those concerns, and then doing the same in reverse. So from a technology standpoint, here's our main concerns, taking that and translating that back to the business and finding that middle ground, finding that balance where you've brought everyone's concerns together and you've sorted through them in a way that assumes forward motion, but is still acknowledging those concerns so that you don't end up with, some backhanded resistance that could slow down your project or cause problems as you're moving through it. I honestly, from a technology standpoint, I don't run into a lot of CIOs or whatever your tech lead is, if it's your head programmer or whoever it is. I generally don't experience them saying no to everything. Their questions are just more around, well, how do you want me to do this? And that's where, again, having an engagement with teams that have the ability, like you, Kevin, to step in and have that conversation and address those concerns and make people feel heard and understood, that can go so far into the future as you're going through this project, because then, even if I have a few reservations, I'll just pick up the phone and call Kevin because he's going to understand my question.
You've completed the first redesign. You've planted the flag. That's done. So, it's been successfully released, but how do you then prevent it from being another 20 years before you start the whole process over again?
Absolutely. And that's where there's a decision to be made, right? You need to have someone who has market knowledge, is looking around at your competitors, is staying completely up to date with regulations and legislation requirements and things like that. But then also, if you don't have someone in-house that can make those tweaks and incremental corrections as you go forward, having that longer term relationship with a partner like Praxent allows you to say, you know what, let's have a once a year broker advisory board, customer advisory board roundtable. And let's hear. Number one, hopefully what we're hearing is really good things, that they're coming to us and going, oh, I heard nothing during open enrollment this year and it was so nice. And the broker saying, thank you. And, bringing those forward. But if there is something that is new and comes along, you're keeping that cadence going forward for a regular spot check. It's an annual physical, and you need to do that with your technology. And whether you have someone internally that can do that for you, fantastic. My experience is most don't. It's keeping that pulse with a partner that can either keep you current or whether you can do it yourself. But make sure that you're doing that checkup at least once a year to make sure that if there's anything that you want to tweak, you're tweaking it, and that you're also still looking around in the market, because every day there's new startups that have the luxury of not having any legacy systems that they need to work with or through, and they can spin something up pretty quick, and it's jazzy and everybody's excited about it, and it may not have the back-end functionality that you want or need, but it shows well. And that's still a problem, because that yours has a great back-end and it does all of these amazing things, and you find yourself in a defensive position in a sales opportunity to promote those things, and you shouldn't have to be there. You should always know that you've done that annual physical and review of your platform and made sure that it's still meeting those heuristics, that it's still as fresh and current as it could be. And that is like something that takes this much time. Whereas you run the gauntlet, it took this much time. Now you've got something that it's, a couple of weeks of review and some surveys and bring it all together. And are we good? We're good. Go forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fascinating point. I think also something that I've seen with the Ben admin enrollment sales and enrollment cycle is that if you wait until those sales presentations to find that you're not competing well, if you're waiting for that form of feedback, it's likely too late in the season to really make any significant improvements. It'd be much better, exactly what you said, Carol, to get that intelligence earlier after the last open enrollment so that you have the time and the bandwidth, or the runway rather, to the runway to address those issues.
Yeah, and the time frame from my perspective that would be best would be like post 1/1. Your January 1 renewals generally are going to be 60 to 70% of all of your renewals. So in February and March, when everybody's taking a breath because we finally got through our 1/1s, let's do a postmortem. Let's do a debrief, and let's run some quick surveys with those folks that helped us to create it, because now they feel invested. They want to be part of it. And let's just make sure that everything went the way it needed to. And then we're also ready before, because 1/1 starts generally around June, July, depending on the size of the group. So I would really target kind of that late first quarter, early second quarter time period.